Good evening. Welcome to the People's Voice podcast here on WFUZ-TV. I'm Blair Castro here with Thomas Jenkins, and we have Pamela Casey, who's running for Attorney General here in the state of Alabama. Ms. Casey, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. I was excited to be with you.
Well, you have a very impressive background. I've been reading up on the Attorney General candidates, and that's kind of, important. It's a very important race. And I've been trying to listen to people as much as I can. And you're the first candidate who's actually come here from that race to talk to us. So I really appreciate it. I guess the first question would be, starting out, what drove you to run at this point in time for this cycle? I know you have a very, very impressive legal background. And there, many candidates that have worked in different capacities, but I think yours is really unique. So I wanted you to kind of highlight that and talk about what motivated you to jump in the race.
Yeah, so I actually started my career at the Alabama Attorney General's office. I was Assistant Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, did violent crimes and our death penalty cases in the state. And in 2010, I ran for District Attorney in Blount County. I was 28 when I ran. I challenged the former DA, the sitting DA, and an ADA, and became the youngest female ever elected district attorney in the history of the state. So I was elected in 2010. Re-elected in 2016 and re-elected in 2022. So I have been the elected district attorney of Blount County for almost 3 full-time terms and a prosecutor for 20 years. And I believe that, the people of this state deserves to have a experienced prosecutor lead that office. So many people don't realize that the Attorney General is our top law enforcement official. And I believe it should be someone who has that experience. And, had a group of DAs and other legal individuals in the state come and talk with me a while back, and they knew I had interest and wanted me to run.
So for the low information voter, what is the difference between a district attorney and an attorney general? What does an attorney general do?
So the district attorney is going to have a circuit. So here in Baldwin County, you have a 1-county circuit. Mm-hmm. Blount County is a 1-county circuit. Now, we used to be on a 2-county circuit. So there are some circuits in the state. We have 42 circuits. There are some circuits in the state that are made up of more than 1 county, but you have jurisdiction to prosecute felony and misdemeanor cases within that circuit. Mm-hmm. So you'll handle any civil cases that relate to civil forfeitures. You'll also handle any and all prosecutions. Now, the Attorney General is a little different. It has jurisdiction across the entire state, has the authority to step in and take any case from a DA. While they're not our boss, they have that authority to remove a case from us if they think it should be handled differently. They represent the state in civil actions. For example, the Department of Corrections is being sued currently. So they're representing the state with that. They're going to represent agencies, commissions, boards, and handle civil actions on behalf of the state. But the majority of the work done, or majority of the employees in that AG's office, handle our criminal appeals, which is every conviction in the state is going to go through the AG's office for appellate procedure. They have a trial division there, and they also have the capital litigation division, which is all of our death penalty cases. So it's very similar to a DA, but on a larger scale with additional agencies and commissions that you're over, or not over, but you provide legal counsel for.
What is that like, working death penalty cases? And also, what is it like, being elected so young and having so much experience by such a young age? So I actually graduated law school when I was 23, and I felt like I was too young to even handle a case in defense mode. I did regional conflict counsel. It was like my little first foray into practicing stuff. And I was just like, nope, this is not for me. I should not probably be the person at this age, much older now, but back then I was just like, I don't think I'm ready for this. So that's super impressive. I don't think people understand, that's very rare. What is that like?
So I actually started doing mock trial in high school and did it in college and then did it in law school and competed nationally. So I had a lot of times people who go to law school don't get a lot of that practical trial experience on a practice level, and they have to do it their first few years of practice. So I had that under my belt. So when I went to the AG's office, I actually went as an appellate prosecutor. I went to the #1 legal writing program in the country. I finished top in the writing procedure program. So that's how I got my job at the AG's office. But then I got the opportunity to try cases. And I was trying capital murder cases and murder cases at 25, 26 years old and all over the state. But, trying death penalty cases, I'm the only candidate in this race that's ever tried a criminal jury trial. The other two candidates have never even walked in and tried a jury trial. I'm the only one that's put a killer in prison. And, the AG is in charge of our death penalty cases. We've had 20-something executions since Governor Abi's been governor. And I truly believe that the people understand that the person handling that appellate side in those executions should be somebody that stepped into the courtroom, who gets it, who understands that it's important that we're prosecuting guilty people and that, death is different. The U.S. Supreme Court has even said that death is different. And you need somebody who has that experience. So, when I ran for DA, I challenged the incumbent, the former DA and ADA. But there had not been a murder trial tried in that county in almost 10 years. And I was trying murder cases there at the AG's office as a young prosecutor. So I had that experience and took that back home to my county. So I was able to do a lot of trial work early on. And even as DA, I've tried all my felony jury trials except for 2 in almost 16 years.
Do you think in this day and age we're about to see a faster track between adjudication and the actual execution?
I like to say that we've taken steps to do that, except that a lot of people don't understand. So there's multiple levels of that appeal. You're going to have direct appeal. And that really has 4 levels because the U.S. Supreme Court could always step in. You have Rule 32, which is going to be 4 levels. And these are all in the state courts. However, where we see the slowdown is in the federal court. When you have that federal habeas procedure, I've seen federal judges who will sit on a case, a death penalty case, and not rule on habeas for 10 years.
Wow.
And so, regardless of how fast you speed up your state procedure, it's never going to speed up that federal procedure. And those judges are appointed. And so, especially in some of the circuits here in this state, and I should say districts. So you got the northern, the middle, and the southern districts of Alabama of the federal courts. And there are multiple judges who will not rule on habeas and take forever. And so that's why you see such a long lag time between conviction and execution.
How do you feel, or how will it affect, I guess, the state of Alabama, the recent news that they're bringing back firing squads?
Well, so Alabama does not have the firing squad. I know that some states do. I've seen capital murders. I've seen the photographs. I've seen crime scenes. I've seen these horrific events. I tried a case where we asked for the death penalty when an 18-month-old baby was beaten to death. And so, I feel like we bend over backward as a society and a system to make sure that we do not have cruel and unusual punishment for these killers who never thought twice about victims when they were killing them, stabbing them, shooting them, beating them. And so I feel like, we do more than enough to make sure that we abide by the law for cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah.
I know something you're really passionate about is something I'm also really passionate about, and viewers of this show will know. I don't like predators, sex offenders, and you have a background in, protecting kids and their safety, and particularly when it comes to social media and like online predators. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for the last over 10 years, I have worked educating and training teachers and counselors and law enforcement officers and prosecutors all over the state of Alabama about the dangers of online and social media for our kids. I'm the only candidate in this race that's ever put a child predator in prison. And I would ask your viewers to take just a little bit of time and just look at what the candidates in this race have done in the last month. In the last month, I've convicted a man who kidnapped and raped a 10-year-old little girl and put her in a hole in the wall. I have my history just in the last 18 months, I've put multiple people in prison for life without for sexually assaulting, torturing young children. And so I have a history of getting thousands of years in convictions for these sex offenders. And I think that's one of the most, if you ask people, what do you care the most about? They will say their families, their children, and their home. If our children are home and our families are safe, although we may have some other things going on, we can feel pretty good about life, right? Gas may be high, groceries may be high, but if our kids are safe, life is better than it could be. And so I'm the only one that has that experience to work with local agencies to ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect our children.
So diving into that issue a little bit, I actually ran for city council locally, and that was one of my things, was wanting to predator proof our paradise in a way. And I felt like it was more of a culture thing necessarily than law enforcement do of these tools and stuff. And, you do see these judges that are kind of lax sometimes. I know because I've lived that story. I was attacked by a predator, and this person is now served their time and is out. Like, we keep seeing that sort of, and this is not a one-time offender. This was a multiple offender. We see it in the news almost all the time. And I felt like, am I the only one seeing this or that cares? And I guess, what do we do as a society, not even necessarily from the legal side, but like, how do we stop this?
Yeah, so I tell everyone, if you see something that doesn't look right, or relationships that seem awkward, or someone in the community it's just something's off. And we all are pretty good about that. Like, something's not right with that person in terms of the way they act around children or maybe women. It's okay to say something. I would rather, we see something, say something. We want people talking. But now look, as parents and as a society, what we have essentially done is turned our children over to these cell phones and to online. And, back when I was younger, I'm about to be 45. Some people may be trying to figure the math on that. So I'm 45. But when I was younger, we had to worry. My mom would tell me, don't go near the man in the white van. Right. So the puppies, if you don't go help anybody find their puppies, don't get candy. And now we live in a world where you can literally, your child can be at home and the predators are accessing them on cell phones because they essentially have that much access to your child because you've done nothing to protect them. There is a Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act in the state that prohibits where sex offenders can live, they can work. They have to check in quarterly. They have certain things they have to do. So, I know in Blount County, we have a great program that really keep a really good watch on our offenders there. But you really have to be proactive in making sure that you're aware of your surroundings and where your children are and who they're around.
One thing that we've seen that has been a subject of concern is unmappable offenders.
Yeah. So, in the state, you can be homeless and still be subject to the Sex Offender Registration Notification Act. You still have to report, but used to that you could not get out of prison, or you couldn't get out of jail unless you had an address that you could give local law enforcement. Well, they determined that was unconstitutional, that you couldn't hold somebody simply because they didn't have a home. So what they did is they went in there and said, if you're homeless, then what you're going to do is we have to at least be able to find you. You can't decide you're homeless, and therefore we can't keep up with you. We can't map you. Mm-hmm. And so you now have to say, like, okay, you can find me down on 6th Street by the 3rd tree. That's where I'll be living. Even though I don't have a home, that's where I'll be staying. Mm-hmm. And so that allows some type of watch. You're supposed to be, if you leave an area or leave a county, and within 3 days, you have to report in another county that you've moved your residence. So there's a lot of strict rules. It's whether or not the agencies enforce them and have somebody who's dedicated to making sure that those people are following that law.
So you can't chip them like a dog,
right? Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could put a sign in the yard that says sex offender lives here? Then everybody in the community would know. I mean, you do have that notification and you do have that registration, but we don't necessarily know in Target whether or not the man standing next to us and near our child is a sex offender. And so that is a concern.
So what are some other priorities you have if you are elected to be our Attorney General? What are some things you'd like to change?
So what I really would like to do is, as we talked about the fact that the AG's office has the ability to prosecute across the state. Currently, all those prosecutors are residing and or assigned there in Montgomery. And so you lose a lot of potentially really good workers, whether it's in the civil division or in the criminal divisions, the appellate divisions. I would like to see to have more satellite AG positions where people could be working in North Alabama or South Alabama, because the way I look at it is you're invested in your community. And so if you work for the AG's office and you live in Baldwin County, it allows local officials to have resources that otherwise they'd have to go to Montgomery. You hear all the time, we got to go to Montgomery. And so I'd like to divide out resources and assistant AGs across the state to be more boots on the ground so that there's not a disparity between, well, we can't get anything done because we have to go to Montgomery.
That might be helpful too between municipalities and counties as well. It seems like that it's told like, municipalities have only so limited things they can do. And then you go to the county, but it's like, it's not in our jurisdiction. Then you have to go, up and up and kind of figure out the, I guess, areas. So that is something I think would be helpful. Going to you just said something that like really was like, what? Somebody put a child in a wall, like in a hole?
Yeah. So we had a situation where a young girl was kidnapped in the middle of the night. She was 10. She was taken to a man's house. He was 57. During that time, she was assaulted, and he had cut a hole out of the stairwell wall under the stairs, and he had put a heater, like one of the space heater, the big bricks, I call them bricks on the wall, in front of it to cover the hole, and had put it in there. And she testified about hearing the police when she was there. They were there. They came to the house initially, did not locate her. But she testified about hearing that, and then FBI got involved, went back out there, and were able to locate her.
And you put that person away pretty recently, is that what you said?
Yeah, they've been convicted. Sentence set for, I think, May, maybe mid to late May. And so it takes a while, so they're going to do a pre-sentence report. The issue with that case was the guy's now 60, and he wanted an offer where he could get out a prison before he died. And I said, well, absolutely not. You do something like this, I'm not giving you an offer that you can get out. Like, you should die in prison. If we had the death penalty in place, that would have been a case that would have been qualified for that. And, we just passed that this past legislative session, but it doesn't go into effect until the 1st of October. And so those crimes would have to be we're not even at the crimes yet. The children have not even been perpetrated that would lead to potential prosecution under the new law yet. And so we did what we had to do to ensure that he never gets to offend again.
How do you balance, I guess, your work life, considering all of the like harrowing work that you see and do? How does that affect you, and how do you kind of compartmentalize that?
Well, being DA is a 24/7 job. There's really no off time. I have 2 children. I'm married. My husband's a teacher, and I have a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. So those cases are hard for me because I think about my children. But, I think it's just what I've been called to do. I believe that is my calling in life, is to make sure that perpetrators cannot hurt our children. And, thankfully, I have a good support system at home. I have my husband's a wonderful man, and able to talk to him about stuff, but also finding that outreach and that, release to be able to spend time with my own family. And now, look, is it hard? Yeah. Are there days that I get angry and I wish, I could physically hurt these child predators? Of course, but I can't legally. But knowing that if I'm doing the good work, if I'm fighting the good fight, that God will take care of the rest of it.
What parts of the system or the legal process here in the state would you like to see changed?
Yeah, so sentencing is an issue. We currently have, there's a lot of good times. So somebody who gets a 15-year sentence, they're going to do at max 5 years, and they're going to be EOSing out and for early mandatory release within about 3. So a 15-year sentence doesn't mean 15 years.
Wow.
Generally speaking, you for every day you served, you're earning really 3 days. So 15 really is a 5. And that's when you would EOS. You would end your sentence at 5. You're going to be eligible to come out multiple times before that. You could be up for parole. So I would let, we had sentencing guidelines back in 2013. They were voluntary, which was meant to reduce the population in the prisons. And when they started doing that, they realized, well, wait a minute, most of our population is violent offenders. 85% is violent offenders. The other 15% are going to be repeat offenders, maybe not as serious a crime, but they wouldn't do what they were supposed to do on probation or reoffended had another case. And so what I would like to see is truth in sentencing. So what does that mean? It means if you get sentenced to 5 years, that's 5 years.
Right.
That's a hard conversation the legislature will have to have, because what will happen is you'll have to change the sentences on crimes. And I think so many times we feel like, or they would feel like they're being soft on crime to reduce it. But you're really not reducing it. You're just ensuring these people serve the time. I tell my victims all the time, just because they got 10, that doesn't mean they're going to be there 10. Well, how long are they going to be there? I don't know. They could come out early on mandatory release. And so I would love to see truth in sentencing so that we would also know with our prison system, our Department of Corrections, they would be able to monitor their actual capacity. Because what day somebody's leaving. You're not having to think at some point, are they, when will these people leave? When will we get new people? So truth in sentencing is really a passion of mine.
I worked on patrol in Louisiana, and this was about 4 years ago now. And I'll never forget, I went to a call where there was a domestic situation with injuries. Girl had to go to the hospital. It was between two sisters. And my supervisor goes, write a citation. And I wrote a $500 summons for court. And that's the explanation was the jail's not going to take them because of COVID policies that were still enacted with 2 years out from that. Do we see that kind of soft on crime approach here in Alabama?
I think we definitely see that in my county. I think that there is a issue in terms of putting people in prison. They've done everything they can to keep people from going to prison. They've done the guidelines. We have what's called community corrections. So if you were to go look somebody up on the DOC website, which for your viewers, you can look at Alabama Department of Corrections and look up someone's name and see where they are and see when they're going to be up for parole and how long they've been in there and what their charges are. But, if you look that person up, it'll say in if they're in community corrections. Well, they're not in. They're out on the streets. But they're considered in because they report more often. So they've done everything they can. So technically you're in custody, but you're not in custody.
Right.
So it's like all these, what feels like these gimmicks and tricks to reduce our prison population, but still we're tough on crime. Now, I do see that as a problem.
Yeah.
So the Alabama prison system, of course, is under a lot of scrutiny right now with the film. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think there needs to be improvements in there in any way?
Well, yeah. So, there's current litigation still ongoing. So it would probably be inappropriate for me to comment on that and then become the AG. But I will say this. One of the issues we have, whether it's on law enforcement or if it's in the Department of Corrections, is the number of correctional officers. So we are way understaffed in DOC, which leads to higher crime within the Department of Corrections. So, I know they have been paying sign-on bonuses, pretty big bonuses, trying to get people to come work. But look, you would be signing up to make probably what you can make down at Target to go in and work with some of the most dangerous people in the state with no firearm, with no way to protect yourself, and you're in there. And so, like with so many of our law enforcement, they're understaffed, underpaid, and overworked. And that's what we see with the Department of Corrections. That's why you see a lot of people bringing contraband and cell phones and drugs in, because they can make more money by doing that than they're making as doing an honest job.
Yeah, there's no incentive to do the right thing.
Right.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion. Like, how do we incentivize people to, do more? And I mean, honestly, when you're paying that low, it is hard. I don't know the solution either, but
yeah, I think it just comes back to funding. I've always said there's two people in the state that don't make enough money. That's law enforcement, correctional officers, and our teachers. My husband's a teacher, and he can usually say, I can tell you who's going to be in your courtroom within a few years of graduating, because they see it, usually as a teenager.
that was why I didn't want to practice. I was doing juvenile defense, and it was the same kids caught up in the system. It was 1 year of that, and I was like, nope, this is going to depress me. And I don't think I could do that forever, because it was so much the same kids every month coming back in, and I just didn't feel like I personally was making an impact like I wanted to. And it is more of a societal problem and a culture problem of how do we save these kids before they get in that prison pipeline, I guess. Do you have any suggestions on things that we can do to kind of stop behavior early and encourage, I guess, less crime later on?
So studies show that if a child graduates from high school, he's less likely to become a part of the criminal justice system. Okay, just getting the high school diploma. In the state of Alabama, in our county, we have it's not in all counties, but we have what's called Helping Families Initiative. So schools, so people may not realize that one of the things the DA is tasked to do under the Constitution is ensure that kids go to school. That's why we have truancy court, because the DA has to, if you don't send your kid to school, then you're in trouble. One thing we're doing in Blount County is identifying those students who are not going to school or having behavior issues. And we're trying to figure out what's the root. Is the root because we had a young child who had a lot of bad dental problems and was in pain and didn't want to go to school because and we were able to get grant money to have that dental work done for the child. So we're identifying root issues that keeps them out of school or cause behavior issues. And what can we do to assist? We had a kid who was coming to school and having issues, but when he did come to school, but most of the time he was having to stay home and stay with grandma because she was sick and she was the one who was raising them. So we were able to help them find resources. So I think a lot of times it's figuring out what's going on at home, because it all starts in the home. And are there issues in the home? We all know this, and you know this from the system, is that so many of our children that we're having juvenile issues with, they're not being raised by their parents. They're being raised by an aunt or an uncle or a grandmother or someone, because mom and dad are generally gone because of drug issues. And so what we need to do is break that generational cycle that's causing that problem. And with Helping Families Initiative, we have a full-time and a part-time person who works directly with our kids, identify people who have behavior issues that school tells us about, going to the home, figuring out if there's something we can do, but also ensuring that they're going to school.
So going back to your race in particular, what are some other things that you think distinguish you from the opponents in this race, and why should people vote for you over them?
Well, look, they can look at the campaign finance in this race, and you can see that I am not being bought and paid for by outside influences or PAC money or special interests. I'm really in it for the people. People don't get, I've been doing this long enough that I've already, I guess you could say, clocked my ticket for retirement. I could go to the House today. I currently go to work as DA for $500 a month. That's the difference between my retirement and being the DA. And so that should send them a message that I'm really in this to do it for the right reason. I don't need a title. I don't need a salary. I am in it because I care and I want to work for the people. And I tell people, like, look, give me 4 years. Give me 4 years, see the work that I do. And if you don't like what I've done, then send me home, because I promise you that I will serve you the same way I've served the people of Blount County, and that was with integrity and respect, because I'm in it for the right reasons. I don't want to be the governor. I don't want to be the senator. I really want to be in Montgomery working to make sure that lives are safer and better for people across the state of Alabama.
So someone told me that they actually thought you were the hardest working person in any of these races, and that you were out putting up your own signs all the time, that you were like really boots on the ground. So what's been one of your favorite things about the campaign, and where you've traveled? Like, what's a unique place in Alabama that you've gotten to see throughout this process?
So I've been on the road for about 16 months. And so like I said, I'm the poor candidate, but I grew up, I was very poor growing up. Neither of my parents graduated high school. My mom worked at a soda plant. My dad worked on the highway department. I got free lunches before everybody got free lunches. I got a job at 15 waiting tables, worked my way through high school, worked my way for college and law school. And I bring that same work ethic to this race. If I could work to win the race, I'm going to work harder than anybody. I've always been the top person, student, athlete, DA, prosecutor. I'm going to leave it all on the line. Okay. I'm going to give it my all and leave it on the line. And so I guess my favorite part about it is meeting the people. It's interesting, just the people, the different type of people you run into. I've been to all the counties, some many, many times. But I've had fun. I told my husband the other day, I said, we've had fun and enjoyed this race because you get to see so much of our state and meet so many wonderful people.
Can you tell us where people can look you up online and learn more, or donate, or have any questions for you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, so we have a website, PamelaCasey.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Pamela Casey for Alabama Attorney General. And I just remind everyone that when you get your ballot, I am the first candidate on the ballot. Mark the first and move to the next race. I'm first on the ballot, first in your hearts is what I tell everybody. And then I would just ask everyone, if you like what you've heard and what you've seen tonight, call your friends, text your friends, your mom, your dad, your bunco group, your book club, your garden club, your Sunday school class, and ask them that they vote for Pamela Casey on May 19th. I promise you that you will not find a harder worker than you'll find with me as your Attorney General.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.